Growing up, I had dreams and aspirations, but always felt like the kid that didn't fit in. For the most part, I wasn't a bad kid, but when I made the transition into adulthood, I turned to the streets for guidance. This led to getting locked up in juvenile hall, doing time in CYA, and eventually a 120-month sentence in federal prison. I had a lot of time to think and reflect during my federal sentence, so I share with you what I learned, hoping I can positively influence someone else's life with Prison Talk.
What's up, everybody? This is Big Herc with Prison Talk. Happy holidays, motherfucker. Hope you guys enjoy our show. We thank you for tuning in. If you haven't got a chance to check out our website, do so at FreshOutSeries.com. Subscribe to our YouTube, man. Hit the button, subscribe. A lot of you guys watch, but you don't subscribe, man. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the videos. Also, make sure you guys subscribe to our Instagram and our Twitter, FreshOutSeries, along with our Patreon. And if you got any questions, hit us up at FreshOutSeries@gmail.com. I try to answer as many as possible. I can't get to everyone. You know, sometimes I get these trolls and they try to talk shit, and it's just, I ain't got time for it. So if you're about some business, I'll try to answer your question, but, cut me a little slack because I can't get to every question right away. I had a question from one of our viewers. Mr. Timmons, I'm a big fan of the series. It's really refreshing to see someone who had did so much time speak so articulately and candidly about your experiences. You are an inspiration to me and I'm sure many others. I have a question about what 9/11 was like in prison. Everyone remembers where they were and what they were doing when they first heard the news. You obviously remember where you were because you were locked up. But what was going on in the prison on 9/11? Were all the inmates and guards maybe crowded around the TV? Did they put you on lockdown so that you didn't really know what was happening until later? Were some of the lifers or inmates who were doing serious time either happy because they had hated the government or indifferent because they had so much time that it didn't really affect them? Did policies at the prison get a lot more strict afterwards, or did it stay pretty much the same? Thanks a lot. Keep up the good work. Sincerely, Michael Techmere, attorney at law. When I first heard about the first plane hitting the World Trade Center, I was like, I think I was in a law library and somebody mentioned that, like, man, there's somebody just ran a plane into a building in New York. And I was like, what? And then everybody, guys in prison, everybody was kind of doing their own programs. Some people were at work, some people were at school, some people had just come from the yard, and people were like, what the fuck is this? It was almost unbelievable. And then when the second plane hit, they're like, man, there's a fucking, it's a terrorist, there's some terrorist shit going down, it's some shit happening that's very serious, man. And planes are fucking flying into buildings. And so guys who were in prison that were locked up for anti-government crimes, like politically threatening individuals in government, maybe attempted bombings or sabotage type things. There was a couple white guys at one institution that I was at the USP. They were in there for some pretty heavy shit. I never got into detail. Like I said, you don't ask people what they're in there for. You just hear about it, maybe through somebody else. But the guys who had anything to do with anything that was anti-government, they were immediately taken to the hole. They were locked down. They were, questioned. Most of everybody else in the institution, program was normal. I think they did lock us down temporarily to figure out what the fuck was going on, but I can't recall. But I know that guys who had cases that involved maybe, threatening a member of a political office or doing something that was like anti-government, maybe something that coincided with something that can be considered domestic terrorism. They were locked down and under investigation and questioned, even though they had already been down for X amount of time. But that's like the extent that I remember when I was at Lompoc when that shit happened. As far as lifers and inmates being pissed off, a lot of them, they just really didn't have a reaction. I mean, these guys are doing life. They're like, what the fuck is it? It doesn't do nothing for me. You know what I mean? These guys, doing that kind of time for crimes where, they weren't actually any victims, and, they didn't kill anybody. They don't have any love for the government. A lot of these guys, you can see it in their eyes, man. They're just pretty much like Walking Dead. Their eyes are cold. They don't have any emotion. The guys who aren't very, educated, who don't really have a fight in them because they don't understand the law, they're just, zombies for Unicorn. They go to Unicorn and work and come back and just lock down. They do that every day, man. It's like they're robots. They're living, but they're dead. So, those guys really didn't have an opinion about the World Trade Center bombings, because the government pretty much threw away the key and let these guys to rot. Guys who have been down 20 years who felt like, they have more or less served their time already. They didn't give a fuck. Why would they care about, these people who went through this horrendous act when these guys were, basically locked in catacombs for the rest of their lives. So, it wasn't a lot of emotion. You heard a few guys talking about it and how crazy it was. But then they're like, at the same time, this government locks away their own citizens for just crazy amounts of time, no rehabilitation, in barbaric conditions, and, no rehabilitation. They say punishment, but it's not the same, it's beyond punishment, man. There's a law, like I've talked about before, of diminishing returns where, after a certain point, man, you're not going to commit that act no more. You're pretty much, any fight has been taken out of you, and it's just at that point you just want to just live. But the 9/11 thing, I think a lot of guys, they didn't really think twice about it. It wasn't as emotional in prison. Guys weren't running around like, oh my God, the government, oh America. Guys were in there like, well, fuck, man, it's fucked up, but fuck, man, I'm in a fuck position. What can I do? And I'm in there doing this time, and nobody gives a fuck about me. I've filed all these appeals, and I've basically exhausted my administrative remedies. And in order for me to support myself, I got to work in this factory and do slave labor. If I don't work, I have no food. I basically, everybody that I loved is, a lot of them is passed on. If they're older guys and their parents have passed on, or kids have abandoned them, families abandoned them. So, they don't really give a fuck about, the government situation. So, that's the mentality, man. It's a sad place, especially when you see guys doing a lot of time. And like I said, to them, 9/11, it wasn't like, they were as upset, or I think as angry as a lot of the people who are civilians on the street were, because of just the emotion that they were dealing with of being locked up. It was just a different vibe, man. You're in a dungeon. Some of them places is fucking, the conditions are just mentally, it's just depressing. So, you have nothing to, nothing to grasp that gives you value. So 9/11 didn't really make a difference to them.
Lockdown's over. Get your yard time in. Exclusively at FreshOutSeries.com.